The night was alive with fury. Rain fell like shards of glass, hammering the earth as if the sky itself was breaking apart. A black car sliced through the storm, its headlights cutting the darkness with a ghostly glow. Behind the wheel sat Brooke, the man once feared by entire cities, now driven not by power but by something far more dangerous: emotion. His hands gripped the steering wheel like a man strangling his past. Every drop of rain seemed to whisper her name. Emily. It had been years since he last saw her, years of silence that turned love into doubt, and doubt into poison. Tonight, he wanted answers, even if they burned him alive. The car screeched to a halt before a small, forgotten house at the edge of town. It was nothing like his world of glass towers and guarded mansions. The paint peeled from the walls. The garden was drowned in rain, and yet something about this house made his chest tighten. He stood there for a long moment, the storm lashing against him, lightning carving shadows across his face. This was the place he shouldn't have come back to. But his rage, his pride, his aching curiosity, they pushed him forward. His shoes splashed through puddles as he climbed the wooden steps, each one groaning like it remembered his sins. The porch light flickered weakly, barely fighting the dark. His reflection flashed for a second on the rain-soaked window, a face hardened by years of war and blood. But tonight, his eyes didn't hold power. They held confusion. Brooke raised his hand to the door. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. Some invisible force told him not to. He almost turned back, almost. But then, through the sound of thunder, he thought he heard movement inside. That was all it took. He kicked the door open. The crash echoed like a gunshot. "Emily!" His voice ripped through the quiet, filled with anger he no longer understood. "Emily, where are you?" The name felt like venom on his tongue, and yet, deep inside, it still burned with longing. His footsteps echoed through the house as he searched the dimly lit rooms. Every corner smelled like her, faint traces of lavender and dust. His pulse quickened. He could feel she was here. He could feel her silence watching him. Then, a sound. Soft, trembling, human. His eyes darted toward the hallway. A faint light spilled from the open door at the end. He moved closer, the tension in his chest coiling like a storm about to break. When he reached it, his breath hitched. She stood there, Emily, the woman he had loved and lost, the woman who had vanished from his life like smoke. She was standing in the doorway, her face pale, her body weak but unbroken. Her eyes widened as she saw him. Fear, shock, and something else he couldn't name flickered in them. For a long, heavy moment, neither of them spoke. Only the rain dared to move between them. Brooke's heart pounded, his throat dry as ash. He had imagined this reunion 1,000 ways. Anger, shouting, maybe even hate. But nothing prepared him for what she was holding in her arms. A small, fragile bundle, wrapped in white. The faintest sound escaped from it. A newborn's cry. The noise was soft, but it tore through him like thunder. Brooke's entire body froze. His mind went blank. He stared at the tiny form, unable to breathe. The baby whimpered again, and something deep inside him, something buried under years of darkness, trembled awake. He looked at Emily, his voice low, breaking. What is this?" She held the baby tighter, stepping back as if protecting it from him. The movement hit him harder than any betrayal ever could. "You shouldn't be here, Brooke," she whispered, her voice shaking but firm. "You have no place in this house anymore." Her words sliced through the storm's roar. Brooke took a slow step forward, eyes locked on hers. "Whose child is that?" His tone was low but dangerous, not from anger but from fear of the answer. Emily looked down, tears glimmering in her lashes, then back up, meeting his gaze. For a moment, her lips parted, but no words came. The silence between them grew heavy, the kind of silence that could break worlds. Brooks' fists clenched, his heartbeat hammering. "Emily," he said again, voice trembling now. "Tell me." Lightning flashed, illuminating the scene. Him, standing there like a storm in human form, her trembling, shielding the infant in her arms. She finally spoke, her voice cracking with every word. "Don't do this. Don't ask what you already know." Brooks' chest rose sharply. His eyes darted to the child again. Soft skin, faint dark hair, small fingers curling as it cried. Something inside him screamed that he'd seen those eyes before. His voice grew quieter, rougher, breaking under disbelief. "It can't be." Emily's breath hitched. She looked like a woman cornered between truth and destruction. "Brooke," she said softly, barely a whisper now, "you shouldn't have come here." But it was too late. He had already seen the truth reflected in the baby's innocent face. The resemblance was undeniable, a mirror he never expected to find. His hand trembled as he took a half step closer. "Emily," he whispered, "whose child is that?" The thunder rolled again, deeper this time, as if the sky itself waited for her answer. Her lips parted, but emotion choked the words. Brooke could see tears building, trembling at the edge of her lashes. He could feel his world about to shift, one heartbeat away from revelation. Then finally, she spoke, her voice so soft it nearly drowned beneath the storm. "Yours, Brooke?" The words hung in the air like a blade suspended over his heart. He staggered back, breath stolen, eyes wide. For years he had faced bullets, betrayals, death, but nothing hit harder than those two words. His gaze darted between her and the crying baby, disbelief warring with the undeniable truth. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Mine." Emily nodded once, tears sliding down her pale cheeks. Outside, lightning split the sky in two, bathing the room in white for a second, enough for him to see everything clearly. The woman he once broke, the child he never knew, the home he never entered until now. The storm outside screamed, but it was quiet compared to the storm rising inside him. Brooks' breath came out uneven, and for a moment, the Mafia boss looked like a lost man, stripped of power, stripped of armor, standing before the life he never expected to exist. The baby's tiny cry filled the silence again, and Brooks' heart stuttered. Emily held the infant closer, her body shaking, whispering, "Please, leave." But he didn't move. He couldn't. The truth had shackled him in place. His eyes softened just for a second, and in that moment, the entire weight of his past pressed down on him. The door he shouldn't have opened had revealed not a secret, but a consequence, one that would haunt him forever. Outside, the rain began to ease, but inside that room, the storm had only just begun. The silence after her words was unbearable. It wasn't just quiet, it screamed. Brooks stood frozen in the middle of the room, rain still dripping from his coat, his breath trembling as if the air itself had turned against him. "Yours, Brooke." The words wouldn't stop echoing. They tore through his mind like bullets, replaying over and over until his chest felt like it might cave in. He stared at Emily, his world unraveling piece by piece, the sound of the storm outside fading until the only thing left was the soft, innocent whimper of the child in her arms. That sound did what no enemy ever could. It broke him. The faint light flickering from the lamp fell across the baby's face, and in that fragile moment, he saw it, his own reflection. The curve of the jaw, the small crease between the brows, the same quiet fire in the eyes. His breath hitched, his hands trembled, and every instinct screamed to step closer, to reach out, to touch what he never knew was his. But Emily stepped back, her grip tightening protectively around the baby. "Don't," she whispered, voice trembling but filled with defiance. It was the same voice that used to whisper his name in the dark, the same voice that once trusted him with her soul, now trembling like a wall between them. He wanted to speak, to demand answers, but his throat burned with something heavier than rage, guilt. His chest rose sharply as though he'd been punched from the inside, and still he stepped forward. "Emily, why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice low, almost pleading, the sound of a man discovering the life he never knew existed. She shook her head slowly, eyes glistening with tears. "Because you wouldn't have let us live," she said softly. "You would have taken him and turned him into another part of your war." Her words cut deeper than any bullet, because deep down, she was right. He had built a world made of steel and shadows, one where love was weakness and trust was a weapon. He had dragged her into it once, and it had nearly destroyed her. The memory flashed before him. Nights of chaos, blood on his hands, the life she begged him to leave behind. And now, here she was, standing before him with the one thing he never knew he wanted most, his child, and he was the reason she'd had to hide it. "Emily?" He tried again, but his voice cracked halfway through her name. He wasn't the man she remembered, the boss, the ruler, the untouchable. He was just a man stripped bare, watching the weight of his own sins reflected in her eyes. "You think I wouldn't have protected you?" "Protected him?" he whispered. She looked up slowly, her gaze burning through him. "You can't even protect yourself, Brooke," she said quietly. "Your world eats everything you love." The baby stirred, sensing the tension thick in the air. Emily rocked him gently, humming faintly, her voice breaking under emotion. Brooke watched, torn between awe and agony. That small, fragile sound, her humming, dragged him back to nights when she used to hum just like that beside him, before everything turned to smoke and violence. His fists clenched, his heartbeat thundering louder than the storm. He wanted to be angry, to demand why she'd taken his child away, why she'd hidden this truth. But instead, what escaped was quieter, rawer. "You kept my blood from me." His words trembled, accusing and broken. He didn't sound like a mafia boss anymore. He sounded like a father who didn't know how to be one. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like the heartbeat of the night itself. Emily didn't look away. Her expression hardened, though her tears didn't stop. "No, Brooke," she whispered, voice steady now, slicing through the room like a blade. "I saved your blood from you." The sentence hit him like a punch to the gut. For a moment, he didn't understand. But then, it sank in. She hadn't run from him. She had run for him, to save the child from the darkness that followed his name. And somehow, that hurt even more. Lightning split the room in half, their faces lit in cruel flashes. His confusion, her sorrow. They looked like ghosts of the same past, haunting each other in the present. Brooke stepped closer again, voice trembling, eyes locked on hers. "Do you think hiding him made him safer? Do you think you can keep my blood away from me forever?" Emily flinched, but didn't retreat. "It's not about keeping him away from you," she said quietly. "It's about keeping him alive." Her words hung heavy, and Brooke's stomach twisted. He could feel it. There was more she wasn't saying, something darker lurking beneath her fear. "Alive?" he repeated, suspicion threading his tone. Emily's eyes darted toward the window just for a second, but that second told him everything. Brooke's jaw tightened, the mafia boss inside him resurfacing. "Emily," he said, voice low, dangerous. "What aren't you telling me?" The thunder rolled again, closer this time, shaking the fragile house. Emily turned away, clutching the baby tight. "You don't understand what your name brings." "Brooke," she whispered, "even now, it's not over. They still watch. They still listen." Her voice trembled, barely audible above the rain. "Who?" he demanded, stepping closer. but she only shook her head, eyes filling with tears. "Don't make me say it," she whispered, "because if I do, they'll come." Brooke froze. His chest tightened, part fear, part fury. The wind howled through the cracks of the house like the world holding its breath. He could feel the danger pressing in, invisible yet real. "No one touches what's mine," he muttered, eyes hardening again. Emily turned sharply, glaring at him through tears. "That's exactly why I ran," she cried, "because everything you call yours ends up destroyed." Her voice cracked, echoing through the small house like a siren. The baby began to cry, startled by the storm of emotions around him. Emily instantly softened, rocking him gently, whispering broken apologies. Brooke stood there, still as stone, watching her with a hollow ache. He realized he wasn't angry at her anymore. He was angry at himself, angry at the man he had become, the choices that had turned love into something deadly. He took a slow step back, dragging a hand down his face, exhaling the years in one breath. "I never meant for this," he said quietly. "You think I wanted to lose you, to never know him?" Emily's gaze softened, but only for a heartbeat. "You always mean well, Brooke," she said, her tone almost a whisper. "Until the fire starts." The line hit him harder than any bullet, because she was right. Everything he touched burned. He looked at her, the woman who once believed in the good inside him, now too broken to search for it. And behind her, the child whose heartbeat meant more than every empire he'd ever built. He opened his mouth to speak, but then a faint noise cut through the storm. A car engine, faint at first, then closer. Emily's face shifted. Fear flashed before she could hide it. Brooke noticed. The predator inside him came alive, instincts sharpening like blades. "Who's outside?" he asked. Emily froze, clutching the baby tighter. The rain hammered harder, the light flickered, and the air grew thick with dread. She looked at him, her lips trembling, her eyes saying what her voice couldn't. "It's already begun." Brooke's pulse spiked. Outside, headlights cut through the reverberation for a split second before vanishing. And in that moment, he knew. The child wasn't the only secret hidden in this house. The storm outside raged on, but the real storm, the one that would change everything, had just found their door. The storm outside raged like a wounded beast, its echo trembling through the walls as Brooke's breath came heavy, uneven. The headlights that had flashed moments ago were gone now, swallowed by the night, but the unease they left behind stayed. Emily stood by the window, her arms protectively around the baby, her eyes darting between the shadows and Brooke's face. For a moment, neither spoke. Their only sound was the rain crawling down the glass, like the sky itself was trying to weep for them. Brooke's hand lingered near the doorframe, his body tense, instincts screaming danger. "Emily," he said quietly, his voice low but sharp, "you need to start talking." His tone carried that old authority, the voice of a man who once commanded armies of fear. But tonight, there was something else buried beneath it. Desperation. Emily turned slowly, her face pale, her eyes hollow from years of silence. She looked at him like she was staring at a ghost, someone who'd once meant everything, now standing in the ruins of what they'd both become. "You think I wanted this?" she whispered, her voice trembling, but steady enough to make his chest tighten. She looked down at the baby, rocking him softly as the child whimpered, sensing the weight in the room. "That night, they came for you, Brooke. I was carrying your child when I heard your name on their death list." Her words sliced through the silence like a knife. Brooke froze, every muscle in his body locking in place. His heartbeat roared in his ears, louder than the thunder outside. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. He just stared at her, eyes wide, as if the ground beneath him had vanished. "What are you saying?" he finally managed, his voice rough, almost unrecognizable. Emily met his gaze, tears trembling on her lashes. "You were marked for death," she said. "Your enemies weren't coming for your empire. They were coming for you, and they knew the only way to destroy you was through the people you loved." The words twisted like a blade inside his chest. The betrayal he'd carried all these years, the hatred he'd nurtured, it had never been hers. It had been his own men, his own world turning against him. His breath caught in his throat, realization crashing through him like lightning. "Who told you that?" he demanded, stepping closer. Emily's eyes flickered with pain. "I didn't need to be told," she whispered. "I heard them, Brooke. The night they burned your safe house, the night you disappeared and everyone said you were dead." The memory hit him in flashes. Gunfire, flames, sirens. That night had been a blur of blood and betrayal. He'd thought she'd left him in fear, abandoned him to die. But now, the truth rearranged everything. She hadn't left him. She had run to survive. He swallowed hard, struggling to find air as the walls seemed to close in. "Emily," he said quietly, voice shaking, "you're telling me you ran to protect him?" She nodded slowly, tears breaking free. "I ran because if they found me, they'd kill him to break you." Her voice cracked, the pain in it, raw, real, and ancient. Brooke took a step back, as if her words had physically struck him. His eyes fell to the baby, the small, innocent life that existed because she had faced hell and chosen to run through it. The storm outside began to calm, but inside him, chaos only grew. He looked at the child again, and something in him fractured. The man who'd built his life on control, on dominance, on power, was now undone by the smallest heartbeat in the room. For years, he had searched for answers, hunted ghosts, blamed her for his emptiness. Now he stood before the truth, and it was him who had failed her. His throat tightened, the weight of guilt pressing down until he could barely speak. "Emily," he whispered, but the word dissolved in his mouth. She turned her face away, unable to bear the softness in his tone. "You destroyed me with your doubt," she said quietly. "You believed everyone but me." The accusation wasn't loud, but it hit with the force of thunder. Brooke's chest burned. He remembered the day he'd found her gone, the fury that had consumed him, the revenge that had fueled his empire since. And now, all of it had been built on a lie he'd told himself. He dragged a hand through his wet hair, pacing, the floor creaking under his boots. "Who?" he muttered under his breath. "Who did this?" His voice grew darker with every word. He looked at her, demanding, needing a name, because vengeance was the only language he knew. Emily looked at him, and for the first time that night, fear, not anger, filled her eyes. "Brooke," she said softly, "some truths are better buried." But he didn't stop. He couldn't. "Who knew?" he asked again, his voice cracking through the air like a whip. She hesitated, her lips parting, but the look on her face told him she was terrified to speak. "Emily!" he shouted, his temper boiling to the surface. The baby startled and began to cry, the fragile sound echoing between them like a warning. Emily held him tighter, whispering to calm him, her voice shaking. "Please," she said, "not here, not now." But Brooke wasn't the man who waited for the right time. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Who knew, Emily?" he growled, every word trembling with fury and fear. She finally lifted her gaze, her expression changing. The fear in her eyes turned to something colder, resignation. "Your enemies," she said slowly, her voice almost breaking, "and one of them is inside your mansion." The sentence fell like lightning, illuminating the darkness inside him. Brooke froze. His entire world shifted again. His mansion, his fortress, his home, the place he thought no one could touch. Someone close, someone trusted. The thought sickened him. His mind flashed through faces, men who'd stood by him, who'd killed for him, who'd sworn loyalty under his name. Which one had sold him out? He turned away, his hands on his head, pacing in short, uneven circles. His voice trembled, laced with disbelief. "Inside my house?" he muttered. Emily nodded. "I heard them talking. I recognized one of the voices. He said you'd never see it coming." Brooke's pulse raced, rage simmering beneath his skin. The air around him seemed to thicken, every breath heavy with realization. "Who?" he demanded again, his tone raw, stripped of control. Emily's lips parted, but before she could speak, a sudden sound outside shattered the moment, the crunch of footsteps on wet gravel. Both froze. Brooke turned his head sharply toward the window, eyes narrowing. Emily's arms tightened around the baby, her fear returning instantly. "They found us," she whispered. Brooke moved, without thinking, years of survival instinct flooding back. He crossed the room in seconds, flipping the light switch off, plunging them into shadow. The baby whimpered softly, and Emily pressed a kiss to his forehead, whispering for him to stay quiet. The wind rattled the door, the storm seeming to hold its breath with them. Brooke peered through the thin curtain, his silhouette outlined against the faint glow of lightning. A car idled down the road, black, unfamiliar, no headlights this time. His mind ran through possibilities, every scenario darker than the last. Were they already inside his circle? Was this betrayal deeper than Emily even knew? He turned back to her, whispering, "Stay quiet. Don't move." She looked at him, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Brooke," she whispered, "if they've come for you again, it won't end like last time." He looked at her, eyes cold yet full of something deeper. Fear, guilt, love tangled into one impossible emotion. "No," he said, voice low. "This time it ends differently." His gaze drifted toward the baby, then back to her. "Because now I've got something worth dying for." Emily's breath hitched, emotion flickering in her eyes. But before she could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. The sound made every nerve in Brooke's body ignite. He raised a finger to his lips, signaling silence. Emily's arms tightened around the baby as she backed slowly toward the corner. Another knock followed, louder this time. Then, silence. Brooke's jaw clenched, his eyes locked on the door. The tension was unbearable, thick enough to choke the air. Emily's breathing quickened, her heart pounding loud enough to fill the quiet. Then, from outside, a voice, low, cold, familiar, called his name. "Brooke." The sound of it sent ice down his spine. He knew that voice. It was a voice from his mansion, one of his own. He stepped forward, muscles coiled, his heart thundering. Emily's eyes widened in horror. "Brooke," she whispered urgently, "don't open it." But it was too late. The voice outside spoke again, quieter this time, almost a taunt. "You should have stayed dead." Lightning flashed, illuminating Brooke's face, anger, betrayal, and the first glimmer of something far more dangerous. Resolve. The rain howled, the baby whimpered, Emily prayed under her breath. And as Brooke reached for the door handle, the world seemed to hold still, because the next second would decide everything. Their lives, their truth, and the cost of love buried too long. The sound of that voice, cold, taunting, achingly familiar, rattled through Brooke's skull like the echo of a nightmare he'd buried years ago. His fingers froze on the doorknob, every instinct screaming danger. Emily's trembling whisper reached him through the storm-thick air. "Brooke, don't!" But it was too late. The door burst open with a violent crack of thunder. A figure stood in the rain-drenched dark, face shadowed beneath a hood, a faint glint of metal flashing in his hand. The world slowed. Brooke reacted on instinct. He pulled Emily down, shielding her and the baby as a gunshot shattered the silence, the bullet slamming into the doorframe just inches from his head. His eyes snapped toward the darkness. But the shooter was already gone. The only thing left behind was the echo of tires screeching through the mud and a low, mocking laugh fading into the night. Brooke didn't waste another second. He grabbed Emily's arm gently but firmly. "We're leaving," he said. She shook her head, terrified, but he didn't wait for her answer. The baby cried, frightened by the gunfire. Brooke wrapped his jacket around the child, holding both of them close as he led them outside into the rain. Lightning illuminated the world in flashes of white and blue. The black car that had haunted the street was gone, but deep down, Brooke knew exactly where the trail led. Home. The place that wasn't safe anymore. The place where his enemy had always waited. In his own shadow. The drive back was madness. Rain slashed across the windshield, wind howling like the ghosts of his past. Brooke's hands clenched around the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. His jaw was locked, his eyes hollow with fury. Emily sat in the passenger seat, the baby asleep against her chest, her lips pressed into silence. She wanted to speak, to ask where they were going, but the fire in his eyes told her he already knew. He wasn't driving home. He was driving to war. Every street he passed carried a memory of loyalty, of trust, of bloodshed, and promises made under the Mafia code. But now, every memory felt tainted. Every face he remembered could be the one behind the mask. "One of them is inside your mansion," Emily's voice replayed in his head like a haunting refrain. The realization burned through him like acid. He'd spent years ruling men who'd kill for him, never realizing one of them had been waiting to kill him. When the mansion finally appeared through the storm, a grand fortress of stone and glass, it no longer felt like home. It looked like a tomb. The guards at the gate rushed to open it, heads bowed, unaware that suspicion had already branded them all. Brooke didn't acknowledge their greetings. He drove past them in silence, eyes fixed on the glowing windows above, where the devil hid behind loyalty. Inside, the silence was suffocating. No voices, no laughter from the hallways, no footsteps echoing down the marble floors. Just emptiness. He tossed his wet coat aside and stood in the dim light of his office, staring at the walls lined with portraits of dead men who'd once called him brother. He poured himself a drink, amber liquid sloshing in the glass, but when he lifted it, he saw his reflection staring back. His own eyes looked like those of a stranger, cold, tired, haunted. "What have I become?" he muttered under his breath. Emily's words echoed again. "One of them is inside your mansion." He set the glass down, the sound sharp and final. His mind raced, flipping through the names, the faces, the moments of trust. Derek, too young, too naive. Santos, loyal but afraid. Marcus, his right hand, his brother in blood. The man who'd taken a bullet for him once. The thought made him pause. Marcus. Always calm, always calculated, always there. And lately, too quiet. He clenched his fists. His heartbeat grew louder than the rain. Somewhere deep down, he didn't want to believe it. But the truth was clawing its way to the surface. He turned toward the window, lightning illuminating the sprawling estate outside, when suddenly, a faint sound. A creak in the floorboards behind him. Subtle, measured, like someone who didn't need to announce their presence. Brooke's instincts flared. He reached for the gun on his desk and spun around, raising it toward the shadows. The room was dark except for the occasional flash of lightning through the glass. The air was still, heavy with tension. Then a slow, deliberate clap echoed from the darkness. 1, 2, 3, and from the shadows, a familiar figure stepped forward, the smirk already forming before his face was even visible. Marcus, his once brother, his once right hand. "You found her," Marcus said, voice smooth as poison. The faint gleam of his gun caught the light. "Guess it's time she and the child join her fate." For a second, Brooke couldn't move. It wasn't shock. It was disbelief clawing at the edges of rage. His vision blurred between flashes of lightning as he stared at the man he'd trusted more than anyone. "Marcus," he breathed, his voice barely human. "You?" Marcus tilted his head slightly, a twisted smile pulling at his lips. "You sound surprised, boss. You really thought loyalty still existed in this world?" The word struck harder than a bullet. Brooke's jaw tightened, his voice low and venomous. "I gave you everything." Marcus chuckled darkly. "Exactly. You gave me everything, and kept the throne for yourself." He took a slow step forward, the click of his shoes echoing in the empty room. "You think I served you out of love?" "I was waiting, Brooke. Waiting for the moment you'd fall. And now, you've handed me your weakness yourself. That woman, that child." Brooke's pulse roared in his ears, his grip tightening around his gun. "If you touch them," he said, every word trembling with fury, "I'll bury you myself." Marcus laughed softly, the sound chillingly calm. "You already did, brother, the moment you let her live." The lightning outside illuminated his face fully now, sharp, cruel, unrecognizable. "You let your heart decide, and that's why you'll die like every fool who thinks he can have both love and power." The two men stood frozen, predator and prey, though it was impossible to tell which was which. The air between them vibrated with tension. Marcus raised his gun slowly, the metallic sound echoing like a countdown. "Say goodbye, Brooke," he murmured. But Brooke was faster. Years of instinct kicked in. He lunged sideways just as the gun went off, the bullet slicing through the air where his head had been. The shot shattered the glass cabinet behind him, shards raining down like stars. He hit the floor, rolled, and fired back. The sound was deafening. Two men, one history, one betrayal. Marcus ducked behind the marble pillar, smirking. "Still quick," he said, his voice echoing, but not quick enough. Another shot tore through the air, missing by inches. Brooke dove behind the bar, his breath coming fast, fury mixing with heartbreak. Every memory of laughter, of loyalty, of the nights they'd bled together flashed before him, and each one burned away under the weight of betrayal. "You destroyed my family!" Brooke shouted, his voice raw, echoing through the grand hall. "And you destroyed mine when you chose her over loyalty," Marcus yelled back, his words slicing through the chaos. "She made you weak, Brooke. You were supposed to be untouchable." Brooke's hand trembled, but not from fear. He peeked around the corner, eyes burning, and caught sight of Marcus reloading. He moved fast, stepping out and firing once, twice, one bullet grazing Marcus's shoulder. Marcus stumbled back, cursing, blood blooming through his shirt. "You should have died that night," Marcus hissed, gripping his wound. Brooke advanced, gun still raised, face cold as stone. "Maybe I should have," he said, voice low, "but you should have stayed loyal." Lightning flashed, thunder roared, and with a single step, Brooke closed the distance. The two men collided, the gun falling from Marcus's hand as they crashed against the table, shattering glass and bottles. They grappled, years of brotherhood twisted into hatred. Marcus landed a punch to Brooke's jaw, sending him sprawling, but Brooke came back harder, fueled by rage and heartbreak. He slammed Marcus against the wall, his forearm pressing against his throat. "Why her?" Brooke growled, voice cracking. "Why the child?" Marcus's smile was blood-stained now, but still cruel. "Because it's the only way to break you," he spat. Brooke's gun was back in his hand before Marcus could blink. He pressed it against his chest, eyes cold, tears burning at the corners. "You'll never touch them again." Marcus sneered, whispering, "You think I was alone?" Brooke didn't hesitate. The gun roared once, echoing like thunder. Marcus's body went still, then slumped to the floor, blood spreading like a shadow across the marble. Brooke stood there, chest heaving, the weight of years collapsing onto him. The rain outside softened, as if the storm had exhausted itself. But inside, another storm began, the one Marcus had warned him about. Brooke looked down at the fallen man who once called him brother. His mind replayed those final words. "You think I was alone." He knew then. This wasn't over. The betrayal didn't end here. There were more shadows waiting in the dark, and the woman he'd left behind was in danger again. He turned towards the open doors. The wind howling through the broken glass. His reflection flickered in the blood-splattered floor, half monster, half man. He holstered his gun, his face hardening with new resolve. "If they want a war," he whispered, "I'll bring them hell." And as he walked out into the rain, lightning cut through the sky like fate itself, marking the beginning of the reckoning that was far from over. The smoke hung heavy in the air, thick, grey, and breathing with the ghosts of what just happened. Brooke's chest rose and fell like a man dragging oxygen from the edge of death. His finger trembled on the trigger, even though the shot had already been fired. Marcus lay sprawled across the marble, his blood crawling slowly across the cracks, winding toward Brooke's boots like a red confession. The gun slipped from Brooke's hand, clattering against the floor, but the sound barely reached him. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. It was the kind of silence that screamed. His breath hitched, the world spinning around him. Marcus's words still echoed. "You think I was alone." They looped through his head like a curse, feeding the dread growing in his gut. Brooke crouched, gripping Marcus's collar, shaking him violently. "Who else, Marcus?" he snarled, voice breaking between fury and fear. "Who else is in this?" But Marcus's head lolled lifelessly, that twisted grin still frozen on his face. It made Brooke's skin crawl. Even in death, Marcus looked like he'd won something. Thunder rolled again outside, rumbling through the glassless windows like an omen. Brooke stood, stumbling slightly, his hand pressing against the gunshot wound on his arm. Blood dripped down his fingers, staining his once pristine white shirt a deep crimson. He walked towards the bar, poured another drink, and downed it in one motion. Not for taste, but to feel the burn, to remind himself he was still alive. The whiskey hit his throat like fire, but it couldn't drown the whisper in his mind. "You think I was alone." He looked toward the doorway. The storm had slowed, but the house still felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. Every shadow stretched long. Every corner seemed to breathe. Brooke's instincts screamed that someone else was there. He stepped forward, gun back in his hand, his footsteps echoing through the mansion like a heartbeat. He scanned the hallways, eyes sharp, every sound amplified. The drip of rain through the shattered window, the faint hum of the generator, the tick of the grandfather clock. Then, a creak. Upstairs, slow, careful. Brooke moved silently, climbing the staircase 2 steps at a time, gun raised. His reflection flashed briefly in the mirrors lining the hallway. A man he no longer recognized. Not the feared Mafia boss, not the ruthless leader. Just a man who'd lost everything and was about to lose more. He reached the upper landing. The nursery door was half open. His stomach dropped. Emily, the baby. He moved faster, his boots silent against the carpet, the sound of his pulse deafening in his ears. The door creaked wider as he pushed it, and what he saw froze his blood. Emily sat in the corner, clutching the baby, eyes wide with fear. A man stood in front of her, gun aimed straight at her heart. Brooke didn't think. He reacted. A single shot tore through the air. The man crumpled before he could even turn. Brooke rushed in, kicking the weapon away and grabbing Emily's trembling hand. "It's okay," he whispered, though his voice shook. "You're safe." But Emily's tears weren't of relief. They were of terror. "Brooke," she choked out, "there's more." He froze. "What do you mean?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "They know where we are. Marcus wasn't lying. There's someone else. Someone who knows every door, every passage, every secret in this mansion." Brooke's mind spun. There were only 3 people who knew those things. Him, Marcus, and... The thought hit like a hammer. Santos, his loyal guard, the one stationed at the East Wing, the one who'd conveniently been off duty tonight. Brooke's jaw tightened. "Stay here," he ordered, checking his gun. Emily grabbed his arm. "Brooke, please." He cut her off, eyes dark. "If I don't stop him, he'll come for you again." He brushed his fingers gently over the baby's head before walking out, his every step heavy with purpose. Downstairs, the mansion had turned into a battlefield of shadows. The rain tapped against the broken glass, thunder murmuring like distant drums. Brooke moved through the corridors, scanning for movement, his senses razor-sharp. Then, a faint click echoed behind him. He turned just in time to see the glint of steel before a knife slashed across his shoulder. He spun, slamming the attacker against the wall. The hood fell, revealing Santos, his young protégé, eyes wild, trembling but determined. "You?" Brooke gasped, disbelief flashing in his voice. "You were like a son to me." Santos's lip quivered, but his words came out cold. "You built an empire on blood, Brooke? Marcus promised a new order, said I'd be part of it. You left no room for anyone but yourself." Brooke's voice broke, fury and heartbreak tangled in one breath. "You followed the man who just tried to kill your family? My child?" Santos's grip tightened on the knife. "You don't get it. It's bigger than Marcus. There's someone else, someone you'll never see coming." The words made Brooke's pulse spike. He grabbed Santos by the throat, pressing him against the wall. "Who?" he barked. "Who's behind this?" Santos smiled weakly, blood trickling from his mouth. "Ask her," he whispered. "Ask the woman you trust the most." Brooke's blood ran cold. "What did you say?" But before he could press again, Santos's body went limp, eyes glazing over. The knife clattered to the floor. Brooke stumbled back, his breathing unsteady, mind spiraling. "Ask the woman you trust the most." The phrase replayed like static. He thought of Emily, her fear, her secrets, her timing. He shook his head violently. No, she'd saved his child. She couldn't. But the doubt clawed deeper with every second. He turned toward the staircase again, footsteps quick, heartbeat uneven. The mansion seemed darker now, the air colder. When he reached the top, Emily was standing in the doorway, baby in her arms. Her eyes met his, but this time they weren't filled with fear. They were calm, still, too still. "Brooke," she said softly, "you shouldn't have killed Marcus." His hand froze on the gun. The world tilted again. "What did you say?" She stepped closer, her voice hauntingly steady. "You think Marcus was your only enemy? You think I didn't know? You think I didn't plan this?" His chest tightened, breath catching. Emily, tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't sorrowful. They were the tears of someone carrying too much truth for too long. "They took everything from me once," she whispered. I just took it back." The baby stirred, crying softly between them. Lightning flashed, painting her face in cold silver light. Brooke's gun trembled in his hand. "What did you do?" he demanded. She looked at him. The man she'd loved, hated, and feared, and whispered, "I didn't have a choice." Then, the front doors exploded open downstairs, heavy footsteps, shouting voices, the unmistakable rhythm of men moving in formation. Brooke turned toward the noise just as Emily whispered one last thing under her breath, something that made his blood freeze. "I warned you, Brooke. The war isn't outside anymore. It's in your home." He looked back at her, but she was gone. The hallway empty, the nursery door swinging shut, the baby's cry echoing faintly through the storm. Brooke's heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of rage and heartbreak, twisting like blades. The mansion that had once been his fortress was now his trap, and the woman he died for once was now his greatest unknown. Lightning struck again, illuminating the blood on his hands, the broken glass, the empty halls. Somewhere below, a door slammed. The hunt had begun again. 6. The rain poured harder, each drop slicing through the smoke like shattered glass. The mansion behind him burned like the ruins of his sins. But Brooke didn't stop. His breath came in ragged bursts, heart pounding with the echo of Emily's last words. "The war isn't outside anymore. It's in your home." He jumped into his car, blood still wet on his sleeve, his mind a storm louder than the thunder above. The wipers beat rhythmically, but nothing could clear the haze in his head. Her voice, her eyes, that look when she said he shouldn't have killed Marcus. It all twisted together into something dark, something he didn't want to believe. But when he turned onto the street that led to her small house on the outskirts of town, the world shifted again. A faint orange glow danced in the distance. Smoke. His foot slammed the accelerator. The tires screamed across the wet pavement as he sped closer, dread clawing at his chest. The closer he got, the clearer the nightmare became. Flames, bright and hungry, devouring everything. Emily's house was burning. The fire roared like a beast feeding on old memories, its reflection flickering in Brooke's wide, horrified eyes. He swerved to a stop, threw the door open, and sprinted toward the inferno, the heat slapping him across the face. "Emily!" he roared, his voice cracking in the chaos. No answer, only the angry hiss of burning wood and the groan of collapsing beams. He tore through the doorway, covering his face with his arm, his lungs filling with smoke. The air was thick, choking, but he pushed through, every instinct screaming her name. "Emily!" His boots crunched over glass and embers until, through the haze, he saw her, slumped against the floor near the nursery, clutching the baby against her chest. Her hair was matted with soot, her skin pale beneath streaks of ash. "Emily!" He dropped beside her, scooping her into his arms. "Stay with me," he demanded, voice trembling. She stirred weakly, eyes fluttering open. "Brooke," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the roar of the fire. "You came back." "Always," he said, his throat tightening. He wrapped them both in his coat and carried them through the collapsing hallway, sparks raining down like hell's confetti. A beam crashed behind them, flames licking at his back. But he didn't stop. The smoke burned his eyes. His chest screamed for air. But he pushed through the door just as it gave way, bursting into the rain. The downpour hissed against the flames, steam rising like ghosts ascending from the ashes. Brooke fell to his knees in the mud, Emily still in his arms, the baby crying against his chest. "You're safe," he gasped, though his voice broke on the words. He looked down at her, her face smeared with ash, her lips trembling. She tried to smile, but tears cut clean paths through the dirt on her cheeks. "You found us," she whispered faintly, as if she didn't believe it was real. You always find me. Her head fell weakly against his chest. Panic clawed through him again. Emily? Look at me! Stay awake! He pressed his forehead against hers, the rain mixing with sweat and blood. You're not leaving me again? Not tonight. Her hand brushed his cheek, soft, shaking. It's too late, Brooke, she murmured. They already came. His eyes widened. Who? But her gaze had drifted past him to something beyond the storm. He turned, just in time to see a black car at the end of the street. Its headlights cut through the rain, slow, deliberate. Then it rolled away, silent as death. The reflection of lightning flashed off something on the driver's hand. A ring. Familiar. One Brooke had seen 100 times before, sitting on a table in his office. Worn by the only other person he'd ever trusted after Marcus. His blood ran cold. No, he whispered. He looked back at Emily, but her eyes were closing, her body limp in his arms. No, Emily! He shook her gently, desperation cracking his voice. Stay with me, please! The baby's cries grew louder, piercing the night, the sound of life clashing against the fire's destruction. Brooke tore off his coat, wrapping it tighter around them both. His mind raced. That ring, that face behind the wheel. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. Not him. The man who'd helped raise him through the ranks, who'd watched his back in every war. The man he called mentor. Victor, he breathed, disbelief twisting his expression. Victor, the ghost in his past, the one who taught him everything about survival, about fear, about control. But Victor had disappeared years ago. Everyone believed he was dead. And yet, Brooke knew that ring. He'd given it to him the night they built the empire together. A vow of loyalty that apparently meant nothing. Lightning split the sky again, and Brooke stared at the road where the car vanished, his reflection glimmering in the rain puddles like a man standing at the edge of damnation. You think you can take them from me again? He whispered under his breath, his tone low, dangerous. I'll burn the world before I let that happen. He lifted Emily carefully, pressing his lips to her forehead. You're not dying on me, he murmured, voice trembling but fierce. Not tonight. He staggered toward his car, baby in one arm, Emily in the other. The rain drenched them, but the fire still raged behind. His past refusing to die quietly. As he placed them inside, his fingers brushed over Emily's pulse. Faint, but there. Relief washed through him like a second breath. He started the engine, headlights cutting through the downpour, and drove into the storm. Every mile he covered was war. His blood, his heart, his guilt, all colliding into one purpose. The baby whimpered softly from the back seat, and Brooke glanced into the mirror, eyes burning. You're safe now, he whispered. But deep down, he knew safety was a lie, because Victor wasn't just alive. He was coming, and the fact that Victor knew where Emily lived meant only one thing. Someone had told him. Brooke's grip tightened on the steering wheel, jaw locked. The enemy wasn't just in the shadows anymore. He was wearing the face of the man who'd made him what he was. Outside, the fire consumed what was left of Emily's home, its reflection shrinking in the rearview mirror until only the rain remained. But inside Brooke's chest, another fire had been born, one that no storm could extinguish. The road ahead was long, soaked in blood and betrayal, and somewhere out there, Victor waited, holding the final secret, one that would shatter everything Brooke thought he knew about love, loyalty, and redemption. But for now, Brooke drove through the rain with a bleeding heart, a crying child, and a vow echoing in his mind. No one will hurt them again. Yet in the darkness, somewhere beyond the storm, Victor's voice whispered like thunder, You still don't see the truth, son. The real war hasn't even begun. And with that, the night swallowed everything, fire, rain, and the fragile line between love and vengeance. The hospital reeked of antiseptic and sleepless nights, its silence broken only by the rhythmic beeping of machines that kept reminding Brooke his world was still hanging by a thread. He sat by Emily's bedside, his fingers gripping her cold hand as if letting go would make her vanish forever. Her skin was pale, her breaths shallow, and for the first time in his life, the man who had faced bullets without flinching felt powerless. The woman who had once faced him with fire in her eyes now looked fragile, almost ghost-like, her beauty dimmed by exhaustion. The storm outside had died, but inside him it was only beginning. He traced his thumb over her knuckles, whispering, "You're safe now," though the words felt like lies. The memory of the burning house still clawed at his mind, the orange glow consuming everything. The scream that tore through him when he thought he was too late. He had carried her out of the flames, the baby in his arms, promising no one would hurt them again. But promises in his world were fragile things. And tonight, fate was waiting to break another one. Emily stirred slightly, her lashes fluttering, her lips parting with effort. "You don't have to stay," she murmured, voice barely a breath. Brooke leaned closer, eyes red from smoke and regret. "I'm not leaving," he said, his tone low, almost broken. "Not until every man who touched our life pays for what they did." His words weren't a vow, they were a sentence. He didn't believe in redemption, not anymore, only retribution. The nurse entered quietly, adjusting the IV and glancing at Brooke with wary respect. "The police are waiting for your statement," she said softly. But Brooke didn't even look up. He wasn't going to talk to men who played by rules written in ink when his enemies wrote theirs in blood. His phone buzzed on the metal tray, the screen lighting up like an omen. An unknown number. He hesitated, then opened the message. Just 6 words glared back at him. Marcus wasn't lying. "We still have one thing that belongs to you." His chest tightened, the air leaving his lungs in a sharp gasp. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't think. Then his eyes darted to the small cradle beside Emily's bed. Empty. Cold. The blanket folded neatly where his baby should have been. The world stopped. No. The whisper escaped before he realized he'd spoken. He shot to his feet, his chair clattering against the tile. "Emily!" His voice cracked as he turned to her, panic surging through every nerve. Her eyes flew open, confusion turning into horror as she followed his gaze. "Brooke!" she gasped, clutching his arm. "The baby! He was here!" The nurse froze at the door, her face draining of colour. I just saw him," she stammered. "A man in uniform took him, said he was transferring the baby for safety." Brooke's eyes turned to steel. "What uniform?" he demanded, voice low and dangerous. The nurse swallowed hard. "Police, I think." But Brooke knew better. His instinct screamed the truth. Someone had gotten inside, someone who knew his every move. "They're watching us," he muttered under his breath, scanning the hallway through the narrow window. He saw nothing but white walls and shadows that felt too still. He turned back to Emily, who was trembling now, her tears cutting through the soot on her face. "Brooke," she whispered, "they took him because of me. They know—" He grabbed her shoulders gently but firmly. "No, they took him because of me. Because I didn't end this when I had the chance." He looked at the phone again, the message burning into his mind. Marcus wasn't lying. The words connected like pieces of a puzzle he wished he'd never seen. If Marcus hadn't been alone, then this wasn't revenge. It was a plan, and the baby was the final move. Emily's heartbeat echoed in the machines beside her, the steady rhythm sounding almost mocking. "Brooke," she whispered, gripping his hand weakly, "don't go after them alone." but the look in his eyes told her she had already lost that fight. "They took my son," he said, his voice dark and hollow. "There's no force on earth that can stop me now." He stormed out of the room, the door swinging shut behind him like a final warning. The hallway stretched long and empty, every light flickering as if the building itself could sense what was about to come. His boots hit the floor in hard, deliberate steps, echoing through the sterile silence. He called one name through his phone. Leon, his last remaining ally. The man who had guarded his empire's secrets. "Find every camera in that hospital," he ordered, voice cutting like glass. "I want eyes on that baby in the last 10 minutes. Leon's response crackled through the speaker. "Brooke, you're not gonna like what I found." Brooke's heart pounded as he turned the corner toward the security wing. The monitors flickered with footage from every corridor, and there it was. A man in police uniform, carrying the baby wrapped in a blue blanket. But the face. When the man turned toward the camera, Brooke felt his blood run cold. It wasn't a stranger. It was Santos, alive, breathing, smirking. The same man Brooke had watched die in his own arms. The screen glitched for a moment, static slicing through the image. When it cleared, the hallway was empty, Santos gone like a ghost. Brooke's fists slammed against the console, sending a sharp crack through the room. "How?" he growled, his voice low with disbelief and rage. Leon's voice trembled. "He's supposed to be dead. I saw the report myself." Brooke stared at the frozen frame of Santos's smirking face. Then maybe hell spat him back out just to finish what he started. He grabbed his gun, the metal cold and comforting against his palm, and turned towards the exit. Outside, rain lashed against the streets again, as if the storm itself was reborn for his rage. The city lights blurred in the downpour, sirens wailing somewhere in the distance, but all he could see was the cradle, empty, silent, mocking. He got into his car, engine roaring to life, tires screeching as he sped through the dark. His phone buzzed again, another message appearing on the screen. This time, it wasn't words. It was a picture. The baby, asleep in the back seat of a black car. The same one he had seen roll away from the fire. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a woman's hand resting near the baby's head. A hand wearing Emily's ring. His stomach dropped, a chill crawling up his spine. His grip on the wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. Could it be real? Or was it another cruel game designed to break him from the inside out? The phone buzzed again. One last message. "You want the truth? Come home." Brooke looked ahead through the storm, headlights cutting through the curtain of rain. Home. The mansion. The place where everything began. The place where he'd lost his soul. His eyes burned with fury and heartbreak as he whispered to the empty car, "Then that's where it ends." And as he drove into the night, lightning cracked across the sky, splitting the darkness in two, as if the heavens themselves were watching, waiting for the final reckoning to begin. The storm had followed Brooke all the way home, a relentless echo of everything that had burned inside him since the night Emily vanished from the hallway, her last words haunting his every breath. The mansion loomed ahead, a shadow against the bleeding dawn, the same place where love had turned into betrayal, and now, perhaps, redemption waited, or ruin. Rain poured in sheets as his car screeched to a stop, tires slicing through puddles that reflected flashes of lightning. He stepped out, soaked to the bone, but he didn't care. His gun hung at his side, heavy but ready. The phone in his pocket buzzed again. Another message, one last dagger. Inside. No name, no number, just that. Brooke pushed through the massive doors, the once grand foyer now a graveyard of shattered glass and memories. The air smelled of smoke and old blood. The chandelier above swayed gently, like the house itself was holding its breath. His footsteps echoed in a place that had seen too many ghosts. He passed the staircase where he first saw Emily smile, where he'd once thought love could exist even in a world of monsters. Now, that memory felt like it belonged to someone else. He followed the faint sound of crying, soft, muffled, breaking through the silence like a thread of light. His heart seized. The baby. He ran toward the sound, his boots pounding on the marble floor, his pulse racing with fear and hope all tangled together. The door to his old office stood half open. He pushed it, and it creaked, revealing a scene that ripped the breath from his chest. A crate sat in the centre of the room, surrounded by overturned chairs and the faint smoke of extinguished candles. Inside, wrapped in the same blue blanket, the baby cried softly, tiny fists trembling. Brooke dropped to his knees, his hands shaking as he lifted his son into his arms. For the first time, he didn't see a reflection of his sins. He saw life, untouched and pure, a reason that cut deeper than revenge ever could. His throat closed as tears mingled with the rain dripping from his hair. "I'm here," he whispered, voice breaking. "I've got you, son. No one's ever taking you again." Behind him, a faint rustle. His instincts flared, gun snapping up instantly. From the shadows, Emily stepped forward, pale, trembling, her hospital gown damp with rain. Her eyes met his, and for a second, the world stilled. "You came back for us," she whispered, her voice soft, fragile, yet stronger than the storm outside. He stared at her as if afraid she'd vanish if he blinked. "I thought I lost you," he said hoarsely, taking a step forward, the baby still against his chest. "I thought—" His voice broke before he could finish. Emily's tears glimmered as she walked closer, her every step weak but sure. "You never lost me," she said, placing her hand over his heart. "You just forgot where to look." He closed his eyes, pressing her hand tighter against his chest. For the first time in years, he let himself feel, not rage, not guilt, but the fragile weight of love trying to live again. The world outside was still chaos. The city would always hum with violence and ghosts. But here, in the ruins of his empire, something sacred had survived. A soft noise made him turn. A figure appeared at the doorway, Leon, his gun lowered, eyes scanning the room. "It's over," Brooke said quietly, still holding Emily and the baby. Leon nodded, exhaustion etched across his face. "Santos and the rest, gone. Whatever they started, it died tonight." Brooke looked down at the child in his arms, then back at Emily. "No," he whispered, it didn't die. It changed." He walked toward the window. The first light of dawn cutting through the grey clouds, painting their faces in gold. Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, her fingers brushing the baby's hand. "You lost everything once," she murmured, "but look at you now. You found the only thing that matters." Brooke smiled faintly, a man who had carried too much pain to ever smile fully again. But this one was real, small, and full of meaning. "I lost everything," he said quietly, "but I won't lose you again." She looked up at him, eyes shining through tears. "Then, don't ever stop fighting for love," she whispered, and the words felt like a prayer and a promise, all at once. The mansion around them still bore the scars of war, broken glass, burned walls, shattered past, but the morning light touched it gently, as if forgiving it. Brooke stepped outside with Emily in his arms and their child between them, the rain easing into a soft drizzle. The garden, that had once been lifeless, now shimmered under the dawn, steam rising from wet earth like the world itself was breathing again. He looked at the horizon where the sun finally broke through, golden and calm. He wasn't the Mafia boss anymore. not the feared man who ruled through fear and fire. He was just a man, a father, a lover, a survivor who had finally remembered what it meant to live. Behind them, the house smouldered quietly, its smoke curling into the brightening sky like a farewell. Emily turned her face toward him, smiling faintly. "It's over," she said softly. Brooke glanced down at the baby, who blinked up at him with eyes too innocent for the darkness they'd survived. "No," he whispered, pressing a kiss to his son's forehead. "It's just beginning." The wind carried their words into the morning, where the past finally let go. And as the sun rose higher, bathing them in warmth, it didn't shine on a king of crime anymore. It shone on a man who had crawled through fire, through blood, through his own ruin, and found love waiting on the other side. And as the dawn rose over his broken empire, Brooke finally learned love isn't what makes a man weak. It's what brings him back from the ashes. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Hit subscribe, because every heart has a tale worth telling. This was Heartwoven Tales, where love bleeds, heals, and always finds its way home.